Open your pantry right now, in your head. Everything looks fine. Boxes closed, bags sealed, nothing spilled. That's the problem. Most of what's sitting in there is quietly aging out of usefulness, while the packaging tells you nothing changed. Some of these items get cheaper the longer you understand them, and more expensive the longer you ignore them. And one item near the end of this list isn't even something you eat. It's the one thing that decides whether your pantry can ever refill itself. Never expires isn't one property. It's a moving target that depends on the container, the format, and what's sitting next to it on the shelf. Some of these last decades in the right packaging and barely a year in the wrong one. So as we count down, don't just ask if it's on the shelf, ask which version of it you actually have. Number 18. Sealed white rice. Walk into almost any store and you'll see the same white bags sold different ways. One version is meant to be cooked this month, another is meant to sit for years. They look identical at checkout. White rice in its regular bag holds up for 4 or 5 years. The same rice, sealed in an oxygen-free container, can last 25 to 30 years. Same food, one variable, and most people never ask which one they're buying. Brown rice makes this worse. It has a healthier reputation, but its natural oils turn it rancid within months. A prepared shelf of bagged white rice might already be halfway through its real lifespan without anyone noticing. If you want it to actually last, repackage it. Calories are step 1. They don't make a pantry work on their own. Number 17. Plain granulated sugar. Sugar never goes bad. That part isn't in question. What's worth checking is what you're paying for a product that behaves identically, whether it's in a plain bulk bag or a decorative boutique canister. Bacteria can't survive in sugar. There's no water in it for them to use. That's the whole secret, and it's why a jar from decades ago is still fine today. The caking people mistake for spoilage is just humidity, still usable. The real risk isn't the sugar going bad. It's specialty packaging quietly taking over shelf space that used to hold plain bulk bags at several times the price for the same shelf life. Buy plain, buy bulk, skip the decorative jar. Sugar sweetens and preserves, but preservation itself depends on something most people don't think of as food. Number 16. Plain table salt, not the iodized kind. Here's a shopper mistake that looks harmless until it isn't. Salt never expires. But the iodine added to iodized salt can lose real potency in about 5 years, even while the salt itself looks exactly the same. The salt never expires. What's added to it might. That matters once you're relying on salt for preservation instead of seasoning. Canning and pickling salt skip the anti-caking agents that can interfere with a curing process. During any shortage, these purpose-built salts tend to thin out faster than ordinary iodized table salt, because they're doing more jobs. Keep one plain, additive-free salt specifically for preservation, separate from your everyday shaker. That sets up the next item, the one ingredient here with the least room for error. Number 15. Distilled white vinegar. Most people grab the fanciest vinegar on the shelf without a second thought. That's backwards. Flavored and aged vinegars, the balsamic, the wine vinegars, lose their complexity within a couple of years. Plain distilled white vinegar, the cheapest bottle in the aisle, holds up indefinitely because of its acidity. The fancy bottle is the one with the expiration problem. Vinegar's specific acidity level is what makes it safe for certain preservation methods, and a canning batch can stall out if the only vinegar on hand doesn't have verified acidity for the recipe. Watch for plain white and apple cider vinegar disappearing from bulk shelves faster than gourmet-flavored bottles, because it's the one actually used to preserve things. Keep it in reserve for its acidity, not its flavor. From an acid that preserves food to a powder that does almost everything else in the kitchen. Number 14. Baking soda. One small box in the back of your cabinet is quietly doing the job of 4 separate products. Baking soda leavens bread, scrubs surfaces, absorbs odors, and can smother a small kitchen fire. Most people buy one box for baking and never think about the other 3 jobs riding along with it. That's fine until the household runs out of cleaning and baking supplies at the exact same time, because it was all coming from one unreplaced box. During any cleaning product shortage, multi-packs of baking soda tend to disappear faster than single boxes because it's substituting for several other purchases at once. Keep a few extra on hand for that overlap. It helps bread rise, but bread needs a grain behind it, and that grain has its own quiet weak point. Number 13. Popcorn kernels. This one gets filed under snacks, not grains, and that's exactly the mistake. Unpopped popcorn is whole kernel corn, the same plant family used for cornmeal. A bucket of popcorn kernels is a dual-purpose grain reserve wearing a snack food disguise. Your popcorn is secretly cornmeal. Store it wrong, though, and the moisture balance that lets it pop can slip away. The same aging pattern that leaves old dried beans stubbornly hard no matter how long you cook them. A household with no other grain might discover the snack cabinet was actually a backup pantry item the whole time. Watch for bulk popcorn kernels quietly showing up on emergency prep shelves instead of the snack aisle. Store it sealed and moisture stable, and it protects both its popping and grinding potential. From a hidden grain to a grain that only survives if you leave it whole. Number 12. Whole wheat berries, unmilled. Flour feels like the finished product, so that's what people stockpile. That's backwards too. The moment wheat is milled, its natural oils hit oxygen, and the flour starts aging immediately, usually rancid within months. The same wheat left whole, in sealed, low-oxygen storage, can last decades. Flour is wheat with a shelf life countdown already running. A pantry can end up full of rancid flour while whole wheat sitting right next to it would have stayed fine. There's a catch. Buying the grain means needing a way to grind it, so bulk wheat berries and hand mills tend to go scarce together, since one is useless without the other. Store the grain long-term, mill small batches as needed. From a grain that needs grinding, to a fat that decides how long any of this stays edible. Number 11. A stable cooking fat, not just any cooking oil. 2 oil bottles can sit in the same cupboard and age at completely different speeds, and nothing about how they look will warn you. Most household cooking oils are high in polyunsaturated fat, which oxidizes and turns rancid within months of opening, faster in heat or light. Saturated fats, like coconut oil, resist that oxidation far longer, staying usable at room temperature for a couple of years sealed. Not all fat ages the same way. Oil doesn't announce it's gone bad, it just smells off one day, long after it should have been replaced. A stored meal plan built around rice and beans can quietly fail at dinner without fat behind it. Keep at least one stable, saturated fat rotated specifically for long-term storage. Fat makes food usable, but nothing makes stored food usable quite like the ingredient that turns dry staples into actual milk. Number 10. Powdered milk. Not all powdered milk is the same product, even when the box says otherwise. The boxed version from the baking aisle is generally good for a year to 18 months. The same powder, professionally sealed in an oxygen-free container, can remain usable for closer to 2 decades. The box and the can hold the same powder, but not the same amount of time. Most people only know the small box exists because it's the only version they've seen on a shelf. During demand spikes, boxed powdered milk keeps restocking normally while the long-term sealed version quietly sells out or backorders. A stored recipe calling for milk can turn out unusable because the powder open on the shelf for over a year just isn't the same. Use the boxed version for regular rotation and keep a smaller, sealed reserve for long-term storage. Milk turns dry staples into real food, and the next item turns bland staples into something people actually want to eat. Number 9. Bouillon or broth base. Picture the 5th night in a row of rice and beans. Nobody's excited anymore. Pantry planning tends to stop at calories and protein and skip the ingredient that decides whether people keep eating the same staples night after night. A small cube of bouillon relies on the same low moisture stability as salt and sugar, giving it a multi-year shelf life in a tiny, cheap package. The smallest item on this list might be the one keeping people actually eating. It's usually treated as a minor seasoning instead of a planning priority, which is why bulk bouillon can thin out ahead of other seasonings once a household leans on it. Stored calories that go uneaten provide zero nutrition. Treat flavor as part of the core list, not an afterthought. It makes food worth eating, but some staples still need something to hold them together to become a finished meal at all. Number 8. Powdered eggs. A pantry can have flour, sugar, and fat, and still fall apart at the very last step. Fresh eggs are usually the first thing to disappear in any shortage, and without them, a lot of stored baking simply doesn't hold together. Sealed powdered eggs, like other dried, low-moisture staples, stay stable for years, compared to fresh eggs' multi-week refrigerated window. The ingredient holding your recipes together is also the one people forget to stock. Eggs feel inherently fresh, so most people never think to look for a shelf-stable version at all. And powdered egg products can end up backordered online long before other baking staples do. Picture a batch of bread made from otherwise complete stored ingredients that simply falls apart because the one binding piece was missing. Keep a modest, sealed reserve, specifically to complete recipes, not as a standalone food, from an ingredient that holds meals together to one that holds a stressed household together. Number 7. Instant coffee, or tea for non-coffee households. This is the item people assume is a treat, not a plan. Abrupt caffeine withdrawal causes real headaches and real irritability, and it tends to show up at the exact moment people most need to stay calm and think clearly. Properly sealed instant coffee, like other dried products, remains usable for years past its best buy date, which makes it one of the cheapest, lightest morale items you can own. Your morning routine is a supply chain, and coffee is the boring link in it. During any disruption, single-serve pods and fresh ground bags tend to vanish faster than shelf-stable instant or freeze-dried coffee, which simply lasts longer to begin with. An already stressful week gets harder over something completely avoidable. Keep a sealed reserve, specifically for routine continuity, not just taste. Routine keeps a household functioning day to day. But the next item exposes one of the biggest myths about long-term storage itself. Number 6. Freeze-dried meals, not regular canned meals. A shelf full of canned goods looks like it could survive a decade untouched. It probably can't, not at full quality. Standard canned, wet-pack food is often assumed to last decades because it's shelf-stable, but its realistic best quality window is closer to a few years. Low-fat freeze-dried meals, sealed in mylar with oxygen absorbers, can remain usable for 25 to 30 years, even though both products get labeled the same way at the store. Not every shelf-stable food is stable for the same shelf life. Shelf-stable sounds like a permanent guarantee. It isn't. It's a temporary quality window, and once people learn the difference, freeze-dried pouches tend to sell out or backorder well before ordinary canned goods do. A household can confidently stockpile cans for 10 years and find the quality has quietly slipped by the time it's actually needed. Use canned goods for near-term rotation and reserve properly sealed freeze-dried products for the truly long-term shelf. This corrects what forever really means for processed food, but one raw, unprocessed ingredient has been proving that same point for thousands of years. Number 5. Raw honey, and why not all jars are equal. Sealed pots of honey pulled from Egyptian tombs have been found intact after roughly 3,000 years. Low moisture, an acidity close to tomato juice, and trace natural hydrogen peroxide make it one of the only foods that genuinely never spoils. But here's the twist most people never hear. Not everything labeled honey is actually honey. At least one documented case involved jars marked pure honey that testing showed had been cut with rice syrup. The item technically exists on the shelf, but it might not be the real thing. Adulterated blends don't crystallize, ferment, or store the same way real honey does, so a jar meant to last forever can quietly ruin a recipe instead. Watch for unusually cheap honey, sitting beside verified single-origin honey, priced noticeably higher. That gap is telling you something. Buy from a source with clear origin labeling, because the never expires claim is only as strong as the product's purity. Honey shows a food that preserves itself, but there's one item that doesn't just preserve itself. It can preserve almost everything else too. Number 4. High-proof spirits, vodka or Everclear. Most people file this under drinks, not preparedness, and that's the whole mistake. Households often keep separate products for disinfecting, solvent use, extraction, fire starting, and barter, when one stable, high-proof bottle can quietly cover all of it. Distilled spirits above roughly 40% alcohol are effectively self-preserving at room temperature indefinitely. The same low-moisture, hostile to bacteria chemistry behind honey and salt, just poured into a liquid instead of packed into a jar. The same preservation chemistry as honey, just in a bottle. During demand spikes for practical use, plain unflavored spirits tend to sell out ahead of flavored or premium liquors, because that's the version people actually reach for. A household with no working disinfectant, fire starter, or trade good on hand might not realize one plain bottle could have covered all three. Keep one specifically for utility, separate from anything meant for drinking. From a liquid that quietly preserves everything else, to a solid, ordinary-looking food proving that same principle at room temperature. Number 3. Dry-cured, shelf-stable meat, Country ham, salt pork, properly dried jerky. Most shoppers assume meat automatically means a freezer, full stop. That assumption erases an entire category. Dry-cured products like country ham are safe at room temperature because the curing process removes so much water that bacteria simply can't multiply. Colonial households used roughly 40 pounds of salt per person per year, specifically to preserve meat this exact way, long before refrigeration existed. An entire pre-refrigeration meat supply, built on salt. It ties directly back to the salt lesson from number 16, just applied to protein instead of seasoning. Dry-cured meats get marketed as a specialty or gourmet product rather than a storage strategy, so they sit in a small section while refrigerated, and frozen meats dominate the shelf space, even though this category solves the exact refrigeration problem the rest of your meat supply depends on. A household stocked entirely on frozen or canned meat can lose its protein the moment power or refrigeration becomes unreliable. Add one shelf-stable, room-temperature protein specifically because it doesn't share that risk. This item survives without help from a fridge or a freezer. But the very last item on this list doesn't just survive on its own, it can multiply. Number 2. Dried herbs, spices, and aromatics. The overlooked flavor backbone. Nothing dramatic happens to a jar of spice when it stops working. That's exactly the problem. Dried herbs and spices rarely become unsafe, but their essential oils fade steadily with light, heat, and time. So a jar can look fine, smell faintly familiar, and even test perfectly safe while contributing almost nothing to the actual dish. Safe and useless can be the same jar. Because there's no dramatic spoilage moment, nobody thinks to replace it until months of careful pantry planning around calories, protein, and fat still results in meals nobody wants to eat. This connects straight back to the Bullion lesson from number 9. Flavor isn't optional. It's the difference between stored food and food people will actually finish. Watch for whole spices, which hold flavor far longer than pre-ground, becoming harder to find in bulk during any disruption. Buy whole where you can, store away from light and heat, and rotate stock, even though safety itself never technically runs out. This item makes every stored meal usable. But the very last item on the list isn't about making food usable at all. It's about never running out of food to begin with. Number 1. Heirloom. Open pollinated seeds. Every other item on this list gets consumed once, and it's gone. This is the only one that can turn into more of itself. Not every seed can do that. Hybrid seeds, common in a lot of store-bought vegetables, don't reliably breed true, meaning seeds saved from a hybrid plant often won't grow the same vegetable the following year. The item people assume is completely interchangeable actually has a hidden genetic gate deciding whether a pantry can ever renew itself. Heirloom and open-pollinated seeds, kept cool and dry, can stay viable for years to decades depending on the species, and unlike hybrids, they reliably grow true to type, generation after generation. A small sealed envelope of the right seeds is a renewable food source, not a one-time purchase. Every other item on this list runs out. This one can restart the whole list. Seeds get filed under gardening, a hobby, instead of food storage, a necessity, which is exactly why a household can own a fully stocked pantry and only hybrid seeds, and not find out the difference until a full growing season has already been lost. Keep a small labeled reserve of the vegetables your household already knows how to grow. This is the item that turns everything else on this list from a stockpile into a system. Calories mean nothing without the fat and flavor behind them. Salt, vinegar, honey, and alcohol all lean on the same basic chemistry, just applied in different forms. Protein doesn't need a fridge if it's preserved the right way. A pantry can be technically safe and still fail if the flavor and morale items are missing, and none of it renews itself without the right seeds. On your next grocery trip, pick one item from the flavor group, one from the preservation group, and one from the protein group, instead of buying more of whatever staple is already sitting there. Check the format before you check the price. Buy what your household already eats, then rotate it. So tell me, which one of these had you completely wrong before this video? The rice, the honey, or the seeds? Shelves don't have to be empty for a shortage to begin. A pantry isn't finished when it's full of calories. It's finished when it can actually be eaten, enjoyed, and eventually replaced by itself.